The sound of boots hitting dry earth echoed through the abandoned ranch as Samuel Olsen dismounted his horse, wiping sweat from his brow under the merciless August sun of 1878. He had been tracking the McCready gang for 3 weeks across the high desert plains of eastern Oregon, and their trail had led him here to this forgotten homestead, 15 miles outside Pendleton, where the prairie grass grew tall and wild around buildings that looked like they had been deserted for months. Samuel was not a lawman by trade, though he wore a deputy's badge now. He had been a ranch hand, a cattle driver, a man who knew the land and respected its harsh beauty. When the McCready brothers had raided his family's ranch outside of town and killed his younger brother Thomas. During the robbery, Samuel had ridden straight to Sheriff Crawford and volunteered to help bring them in. The sheriff, knowing Samuel's reputation as an honest man and a good shot, had deputized him on the spot. That had been in early July, and now the summer heat bore down relentlessly as Samuel approached the dilapidated main house with caution. The structure leaned slightly to one side, its wooden boards weathered gray by years of sun and wind. Windows were broken, and the front door hung open on rusted hinges. Samuel drew his revolver and moved carefully up the sagging porch steps, listening for any sound that might indicate someone was inside. The McCready gang had split up 2 days ago, according to the tracks he had been following. 3 riders had headed north toward the Columbia River, while 2 had come this way. Samuel had chosen to follow these 2, hoping one of them was Jack McCready himself, the eldest brother and the one who had pulled the trigger on Thomas. Inside the house, dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced through gaps in the roof. Furniture lay overturned, and animal droppings suggested that raccoons or other creatures had made this place their home. Samuel moved through the front room, into what had once been a kitchen. Empty tin cans littered the floor, some of them recent enough that they had not yet rusted completely. Someone had been here within the last few days. He continued his search methodically, checking each room on the ground floor. Nothing. No sign of the McCready brothers, no indication of where they might have gone. Samuel stood in the center of the kitchen, turning slowly, his instincts telling him something was not right about this place. The gang would not have ridden this far off the main road without reason. They were running scared, looking for a place to hide or regroup. Then he heard it. A faint sound, barely audible, coming from beneath his feet. A scraping, like something being dragged across wood. Samuel froze, listening intently. There it was again, followed by what might have been a voice, weak and muffled. His eyes scanned the kitchen floor until he noticed what he had missed before. A section of floorboards that did not quite match the others, and a recessed iron ring handle partially hidden beneath an overturned crate. Samuel holstered his revolver and moved the crate aside, then grasped the ring and pulled. The trapdoor was heavy and resisted at first, the hinges protesting with a rusty screech. Below was darkness and the smell of damp earth. Samuel struck a match and held it above the opening, peering down into what appeared to be a root cellar. Wooden steps descended into shadows, and as his eyes adjusted, he thought he saw movement at the bottom. "Hello?" he called down. "Anyone there?" The response was immediate but barely audible, a female voice hoarse and desperate. "Help! Please help me." Samuel lit the kerosene lantern he had taken from his saddlebag earlier and descended the steps carefully, holding the lantern high. The cellar was small and cramped, with earthen walls and a low ceiling supported by wooden beams. In the far corner, huddled on the dirt floor, was a young woman. Her dark hair was matted and tangled, her dress torn and filthy. Her wrists were bound with rope, and as Samuel approached, he saw that one of her ankles was chained to a heavy support beam by a rusted iron shackle. "Dear God," Samuel breathed, setting the lantern down and kneeling beside her. "Who did this to you?" The woman looked up at him with eyes that held both fear and desperate hope. Her face was smudged with dirt, her lips cracked and dry. But even in her current state, Samuel could see she was young, probably not more than 22 or 23 years old. "Please," she whispered, "get me out of here. They will come back." "Who will come back?" Samuel asked, though he already suspected the answer. He pulled out his knife and began sawing through the ropes binding her wrists. "2 men, brothers, I think. They took me from the stagecoach 4 days ago." Her voice broke. "They kept saying they needed insurance, that I was valuable. They chained me down here and said I was their ticket out if anyone came looking." Samuel's jaw tightened. The McCready brothers. They had taken a hostage. "What is your name?" Fiona Preston. She winced as the ropes fell away, and circulation returned painfully to her hands. I was traveling from Portland to Pendleton to meet my brother. He is a teacher there. The stage was held up on the mountain pass, and everyone was robbed. The other passengers were let go, but they took me. Samuel examined the shackle around her ankle. It was old but solid, locked with a mechanism that would require a key or considerable force to break. I am Samuel Olsen, deputy out of Pendleton. I have been tracking the men who took you. He stood and looked around the cellar, searching for something he could use. We need to get this chain off you. They have the key, Fiona said quietly. One of them, the older one with the scar on his face, he keeps it on a ring on his belt. That would be Jack McCready. Samuel had seen wanted posters with descriptions that matched. He looked back at Fiona, seeing the exhaustion and dehydration in her face. How long has it been since you had water? I do not know. A day? They brought me some yesterday morning, I think. It is hard to keep track of time down here. Her voice was weak, and Samuel could hear the toll the ordeal had taken on her. All right, sit tight. I am going to get you out of here. Samuel climbed back up the stairs and emerged into the kitchen, his mind racing through options. He could ride back to Pendleton for help and proper tools, but that would take most of a day, and Fiona did not look like she could afford to wait that long. The McCready brothers might return before then as well. No, he needed to act now. Samuel went out to his horse and retrieved his rifle and a length of rope from his saddlebag. He also had a small crowbar he used for various trail repairs. It was not ideal, but it might work. He grabbed his canteen, which was still half full of water, and returned to the cellar. Fiona's eyes brightened slightly when she saw the canteen. Samuel uncapped it and held it to her lips, letting her drink slowly. Not too much at once, he cautioned. Your stomach needs to adjust. She nodded, taking small sips. When she had drunk about half of what remained, Samuel capped the canteen and set it aside. I am going to try to break that chain. It is going to be loud, and if those men are anywhere nearby, they might hear it. But I do not see another option. Do it, Fiona said, with more strength in her voice now. I do not care if they hear. I cannot stay down here anymore. Samuel positioned the crowbar against the chain link closest to the shackle and began applying pressure. The metal was old and corroded, which worked in their favor. He braced himself and pushed with all his strength. The chain groaned but held. He adjusted his position and tried again, this time striking the crowbar with a rock he found on the cellar floor. The impact rang out like a bell in the confined space. After several attempts, with sweat pouring down his face, Samuel felt the chain begin to give. One more solid hit, and the link split apart with a sharp crack. Fiona gasped in relief, though the shackle remained locked around her ankle. At least now she was no longer tethered to the beam. Can you walk? Samuel asked, offering his hand to help her up. Fiona tried to stand, but her legs buckled immediately. The days of being chained in one position had taken their toll. Samuel caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist to steady her. She leaned against him, breathing hard from the effort. I cannot, she said, frustration and embarrassment in her voice. My legs, they will not hold me. That is all right, Samuel replied. I am going to carry you out of here. Just hold on to me. He bent and lifted her carefully, one arm beneath her knees and the other supporting her back. Fiona was lighter than he expected, clearly having lost weight during her captivity. She wrapped her arms around his neck instinctively, and Samuel noticed how she trembled, whether from weakness or fear or both, he could not tell. Carrying her up the narrow cellar steps proved challenging, but Samuel managed it by moving slowly and keeping his balance. When they emerged into the kitchen, Fiona turned her face away from the light, her eyes unaccustomed to the brightness after days in darkness. Samuel paused to let her adjust, and then continued through the house toward the front door. As they reached the doorway, Samuel stopped. The wooden frame had swelled in the dry heat, and the door, which had been hanging open when he arrived, had somehow shifted and now blocked their path. The damaged hinges meant he could not simply push it open while carrying Fiona. He would need both hands. Hold on tight, he told her, adjusting his grip. Then, taking a step back, he turned his shoulder toward the door and drove forward with all the force he could muster while still protecting the woman in his arms. The old wood splintered and gave way, the door breaking free from its damaged hinges and crashing outward onto the porch. Samuel stumbled through the opening, catching his balance on the porch boards. Bright sunlight flooded over them as they emerged from the dark house. The warmth was immediate and intense after the cool dampness of the cellar. Fiona blinked against the brilliance, raising one hand to shield her eyes. Samuel carried her down the porch steps and across the yard to where a large cottonwood tree provided shade. He set her down gently, propping her back against the tree trunk. "Stay here while I get my horse," he said. "We need to leave before those men return." Fiona nodded, her eyes still adjusting, but taking in her surroundings with an expression of profound relief. Samuel could see tears beginning to streak through the dirt on her cheeks. He wanted to offer comfort, but urgency pressed on him. Every minute they remained here increased the danger. He jogged to where his horse stood patiently waiting and led the animal back to the cottonwood tree. As he approached Fiona, he noticed she was looking down at the shackle still locked around her ankle, her fingers touching it tentatively. "We will get that off you once we are somewhere safe," Samuel assured her. "Right now, we need to put distance between us and this place." "I understand," Fiona said, looking up at him. "Thank you. I thought I would die down there." The rawness in her voice struck something in Samuel's chest. He knelt beside her again. "You are safe now. I give you my word." Their eyes met, and for a moment, despite the urgency of their situation, Samuel found himself truly seeing her for the first time. Beyond the dirt and exhaustion, Fiona Preston had a strength in her gaze that spoke of resilience. Her features were delicate but determined, and there was intelligence in her brown eyes that had not been extinguished by her ordeal. Fiona seemed to be studying him as well, taking in his weathered face, the concern evident in his blue-gray eyes, the gentle way he handled her, despite his obvious capability for violence when needed. "You are not just looking for me, are you? You were tracking those men for another reason." Samuel stood and moved to his horse, checking the saddle. "They killed my brother during a robbery 3 weeks ago. I have been hunting them since." He said it matter-of-factly, but Fiona heard the underlying pain. "I am sorry," she said softly. Samuel nodded in acknowledgement, but did not elaborate. He finished checking his gear and then turned back to Fiona. "I am going to lift you onto the horse. It will be uncomfortable with that shackle, but we will move as carefully as we can." He lifted her again, and this time Fiona seemed less tense in his arms, trusting him to be gentle. Samuel settled her into the saddle side saddle style to avoid aggravating her injured ankle, then swung up behind her. He wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady and took the reins with his other hand. "Which way?" Fiona asked, as Samuel urged the horse forward at a walk. "Pendleton is southeast from here, about 15 miles. But I want to take a different route than the main trail in case the McCready brothers are coming back this way. We will head more directly east and pick up the Umatilla River, then follow it down into town. It is longer, but safer." Fiona nodded, leaning back against him slightly as the horse moved into a gentle trot. Samuel could feel her exhaustion in the way she rested against his chest, and he adjusted his hold to make sure she felt secure. The heat of the afternoon sun bore down on them as they rode across the high desert grassland, and Samuel wished he had more water to give her. They rode in silence for the first hour, Samuel constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. The landscape was typical of eastern Oregon in late summer, golden grass stretching in all directions, interrupted occasionally by volcanic rock formations and hardy juniper trees. In the distance to the east, the Blue Mountains rose in hazy silhouette. Eventually, Fiona spoke. "How long have you lived in Pendleton?" "Most of my life," Samuel replied. "My family came out from Missouri in 1861, when I was just a boy. My father wanted to start a cattle ranch, and he did. It has been successful enough, though it is my older brother Martin who runs it now. I work for him when I'm not helping the sheriff." "And your brother who was killed. Thomas, you said?" Samuel's arm tightened slightly around her waist, an unconscious reaction to the grief that still felt fresh. "He was the youngest of us, only 19. He had his whole life ahead of him." Samuel paused, then continued quietly. "He was at the ranch house when the McCready gang showed up. They wanted fresh horses and whatever money was in the safe. Thomas tried to stop them. He always was braver than he was smart." Fiona reached up and placed her hand over Samuel's where it rested against her side. "He sounds like he was a good man." "He was." Samuel cleared his throat, surprised by the comfort her simple gesture provided. "What about you? You said you were coming to Pendleton to meet your brother." "Yes, Henry. He took a position teaching at the new school that opened last spring. He has been writing to me for months, telling me how much I would love it here, how much opportunity there is in a growing town like Pendleton. I was living in Portland with our aunt after our parents died 2 years ago. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Fiona's voice grew soft. Henry is all the family I have left. He must be worried sick. I was supposed to arrive 5 days ago. We will get word to him as soon as we reach town, Samuel assured her. Doc Hanson will want to look at you as well. Make sure you are all right. I am all right, Fiona said, though the weariness in her voice suggested otherwise. Or I will be, once I have had a proper bath and some real food, and sleep. I could not really sleep down there. Every noise made me think they were coming back. Samuel felt anger rise in him again at what she had endured. Did they hurt you? Beyond keeping you chained, I mean. Fiona was quiet for a moment. They did not touch me in that way, if that is what you are asking. The older one, Jack, he said I was worth more to them unharmed. Insurance, like I told you. They were planning to use me to negotiate if they were cornered. The younger one, Billy, he wanted to just let me go, but Jack would not hear of it. They argued about it the last time they came to give me water. When was that? Yesterday morning, I think. It is hard to be sure. They said they were going into town to scout things out, see if it was safe to make a run for it. They have been in that cellar with me, I think, at least part of the time. I could hear them talking upstairs sometimes. Samuel processed this information. If the brothers had gone into Pendleton yesterday to scout, they might have already left the area entirely, or they might have decided to come back for their hostage. Either way, getting Fiona to safety was the priority now. They continued riding, and as the afternoon wore on, the temperature seemed to climb even higher. Samuel could feel Fiona wilting against him, her body heavy with exhaustion. He pushed his horse a bit faster, eager to reach the river where they could rest and Fiona could drink her fill. When they finally reached the Umatilla River, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the water. The river ran low this time of year, but there was still a good flow in the main channel. Samuel guided his horse down the bank to the water's edge and dismounted, then lifted Fiona down carefully. She immediately moved toward the water, kneeling at the edge and cupping her hands to drink. Samuel did not stop her this time, knowing she needed it. He let his horse drink as well, then refilled his canteen. When Fiona had drunk her fill, she sat back on the grassy bank and closed her eyes, tilting her face toward the sun. I never thought I would be so grateful for sunlight, she said quietly, or for the sound of running water, or for just being outside. Samuel sat down beside her, giving his horse a rest. You are a strong woman, Miss Preston. A lot of people would not have survived what you went through. Fiona opened her eyes and looked at him. I survived because I refused to give up hope that someone would find me, and someone did. You did. There was something in the way she looked at him that made Samuel's heart beat a little faster. He had been so focused on tracking the McCready gang, so consumed by grief and the need for justice, that he had not allowed himself to feel much of anything else. But sitting here beside this woman he had rescued from darkness, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun and seeing the gratitude and something more in her eyes, Samuel felt something shift inside him. We should keep moving, he said, standing and offering his hand to help her up. We can make town before full dark if we do not linger. Fiona took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and Samuel steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Are you all right? Just dizzy, Fiona admitted. It will pass. Samuel studied her face, seeing the pallor beneath the sunburn she was developing. When did you last eat? The morning they took me. They gave me water, but no food. Jack said it was easier to control someone who was weakened by hunger. Samuel's jaw clenched. He went to his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of jerky and some hardtack he had been saving. It was not much, but it was something. Here, eat this slowly. It will help. Fiona accepted the food gratefully and nibbled at the jerky while Samuel prepared to mount up again. This time, he climbed into the saddle first and then pulled Fiona up in front of him, settling her more securely so she could rest against him as they rode. With her situated, he urged his horse forward, following the river trail toward Pendleton. As twilight began to paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, they crested a rise and saw the lights of Pendleton spread out in the valley below. The town had grown considerably in recent years, becoming a regional center for the wool and wheat industries. Samuel could see the main street with its rows of buildings, the railroad depot at the north end, and the scattering of houses spreading out from the town center. "We are almost there," Samuel said, and he felt Fiona relax even more against him. "Will you stay with me?" she asked suddenly. "When we get to town, I mean. I do not know anyone except Henry, and I do not even know where to find him. I know it is a lot to ask, but—" "I will stay with you," Samuel interrupted gently. "I will make sure you are safe and that you find your brother. You have my word." They rode down into town as full darkness fell, the street lamps casting pools of yellow light along Main Street. A few people were still out despite the late hour, and several turned to stare as Samuel rode past, with a disheveled woman in his arms. He ignored them and went straight to Doc Hanson's house, which doubled as the town's medical clinic. Samuel dismounted and lifted Fiona down, then helped her up the steps to the front door. He knocked firmly, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal a gray-haired man in his 60s wearing spectacles. "Samuel, what in blazes?" Doc Hanson stopped when he saw Fiona. "Good Lord, boy, what happened?" "This is Miss Fiona Preston. She was taken hostage by the McCready gang 4 days ago. She needs water, food, and medical attention, and we need to get this shackle off her ankle." Doc Hanson stepped aside immediately. Bring her in. Martha," he called to his wife. "We need hot water and clean linens, and send someone to fetch the sheriff." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Martha Hanson, a kind-faced woman who served as the town's unofficial nurse, helped Fiona into a back room where she could be examined and cleaned up. Doc Hanson worked on removing the shackle, finally succeeding by filing through the old lock mechanism. Samuel waited in the front room, giving his statement to Sheriff Crawford when he arrived. "So, the McCready brothers are still out there," the sheriff said, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. He was a tall man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for being thorough. "And they might come looking for their hostage." "It is possible," Samuel agreed. "They said she was their insurance. They might not give her up easily." "Then we will need to post guards. I will have deputies watching Doc's house and the hotel." "Where is her brother? Preston, you said?" "Henry Preston. He is a teacher here." "Ah, yes, I know Henry. Good man. Lives in a boarding house on Court Street. I will send someone to fetch him." The sheriff stood and clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "You did good work today, Sam. Real good work. Get some rest. We will talk more in the morning." But Samuel could not rest, not yet. He waited until Martha Hanson emerged from the back room and gave him a reassuring smile. "She is going to be fine. Dehydrated and exhausted, with some nasty bruises and that chafed ankle, but nothing that will not heal. Doc gave her some broth, and she is sleeping now. Best thing for her." "Can I see her?" Samuel asked, surprising himself with the question. Martha studied him with knowing eyes. 5 minutes. She needs her rest, and I imagine you do too." Samuel entered the back room quietly. Fiona lay in a clean bed, her face washed and her hair brushed back. She looked young and vulnerable in the lamplight, but also peaceful in a way she had not looked since he found her. He started to turn and leave, not wanting to disturb her, when her eyes fluttered open. "Samuel?" Her voice was drowsy with exhaustion and whatever medicine Doc Hanson had given her. "I am sorry. I did not mean to wake you." He moved closer to the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better, clean, safe." She reached out and found his hand, squeezing it weakly. "Thank you. For everything. I do not think I said that properly before." "You do not need to thank me. I am just glad I found you when I did." "Will I see you tomorrow?" There was something almost vulnerable in the question. "Yes," Samuel promised. "I will check on you tomorrow. Your brother should be here soon. The sheriff sent for him." Fiona's eyes began to drift closed again. "Good, that is good. But I still want to see you tomorrow." Samuel smiled despite himself. "You will. Now rest." He slipped out of the room and found Martha waiting with a knowing expression. "That girl has taken a shine to you, Samuel Olsen. She has been through an ordeal. She is just grateful, that is all." Martha said noncommittally. "And what about you? Have you taken a shine to her?" Samuel did not answer, but the slight color that rose to his weathered cheeks told Martha everything she needed to know. Samuel finally made his way to his own small house on the edge of town, his mind full of the day's events. He tended to his horse, made sure the animal had feed and water, then went inside and collapsed onto his bed fully clothed. Sleep took him immediately, deep and dreamless. He woke to bright sunlight streaming through his window and the sound of someone pounding on his door. Samuel jerked awake, his hand instinctively reaching for his revolver, before he recognized Sheriff Crawford's voice calling his name. "I am coming," Samuel called, rolling out of bed and going to open the door. The sheriff stood on his porch looking grim. "We have got a problem," Crawford said without preamble. "The McCready brothers were spotted about an hour ago riding hard toward town, and they are asking questions about whether anyone brought in a woman yesterday." Samuel was fully awake now. "They are coming for her. Looks that way. I have got deputies positioned around Doc's place, but I want you there too. You are the one who faced them before, and you are the one Miss Preston trusts. Get your rifle and meet me there in 10 minutes. Samuel nodded and quickly gathered his weapons and gun belt. He splashed water on his face from the basin, ran his fingers through his hair, and headed out. The morning air was already warm, promising another scorching day. As he walked quickly toward Doc Hanson's house, Samuel's mind was working through scenarios. The McCready brothers were desperate men, and desperate men did stupid things. But they were also dangerous, and Samuel knew they would not hesitate to hurt innocent people if they thought it would help them escape. When he arrived at Doc's house, he found it had become something of a fortress. 2 deputies were positioned across the street with clear sight lines to the front door. Another was in the alley beside the house. Sheriff Crawford stood on the porch, and he nodded as Samuel approached. "How was Miss Preston this morning?" Samuel asked. "Awake and eating breakfast with her brother. Henry got here late last night. He has not left her side since." The sheriff looked at Samuel carefully. "She asked for you first thing this morning." Before Samuel could respond, the front door opened and Henry Preston emerged. He was a slender man in his late 20s with spectacles and the slightly rumpled look of someone who had been up all night. When he saw Samuel, his face transformed with gratitude. "Mr. Olsen," he said, extending his hand, "I cannot thank you enough for what you did. My sister told me everything. You saved her life." Samuel shook his hand. "I am just glad I found her when I did. How is she this morning?" "Remarkably well, all things considered. She's asking to see you, actually. Would you mind coming in?" Samuel glanced at the sheriff, who nodded. "Go ahead, I will keep watch out here. But if those boys show up, everyone gets inside immediately. Understood?" Samuel followed Henry into the house and through to the back room, where Fiona had slept. She was sitting up in bed now, wearing a clean nightgown that Martha Hanson must have provided. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, dark and shining in the morning light from the window. When she saw Samuel, her face lit up in a way that made his chest feel tight. "You came," she said, smiling. "I said I would." Samuel moved into the room, suddenly feeling awkward. Henry had retreated to give them privacy, closing the door partway behind him. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, tired, but so much better than yesterday." Fiona's smile faded slightly. "Henry told me the men who took me are coming back, that they are looking for me. They might be, but you are safe here. The sheriff has deputies posted, and I am here too. No one is going to get to you." Samuel moved closer to the bed. "I need you to stay in this room and away from the windows. If shooting starts, get down on the floor and stay down. Can you do that?" "Yes." Fiona reached out and took his hand. "Samuel, you do not have to put yourself in danger for me again. You already saved me once, and I will do it again if I have to." Samuel realized he was still holding her hand and made no move to let go. "Those men hurt a lot of people. Fiona, they killed my brother. They took you. They need to answer for what they have done. I know, I just do not want anything to happen to you." Her brown eyes were serious, concerned. "Promise me you will be careful." "I promise." Samuel squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "I should get back outside, but I will be right out there if you need anything." As he turned to leave, Fiona called after him. "Samuel, when this is over, when those men are dealt with and it is safe, would you have dinner with me? A proper dinner, I mean, as a thank you." Samuel looked back at her and saw hope and something more in her expression. His heart, which had felt closed off since Thomas's death, seemed to open slightly. "I would like that very much." He left the room with a lightness in his step that had not been there before, even as he prepared himself for potential violence. When he emerged onto the porch, Sheriff Crawford gave him a knowing look, but said nothing. They waited as the morning wore on, the sun climbing higher and the heat building. Samuel positioned himself on the porch with his rifle, watching the street. Townspeople went about their business, though word had clearly spread that something was happening. The street in front of Doc's house was notably less busy than usual. It was nearly noon when one of the deputies across the street gave a low whistle and gestured down Main Street. Samuel followed his gaze and saw two riders approaching at a steady pace. Even from a distance, he recognized the horses from the tracks he had been following. The McCready brothers had arrived. "Everyone inside except you and me," Sheriff Crawford ordered the deputies. "Let them come to us. I want to try talking first." Samuel stayed on the porch as the two riders drew closer. He could see them clearly now. Jack McCready in the lead, a hard-looking man in his 30s with a scar running down his left cheek. Behind him rode his younger brother Billy, who looked nervous and kept his hand near his gun. They stopped their horses about 20 feet from the house, and Jack McCready's eyes swept the porch, taking in the sheriff and Samuel with their weapons ready. "Morning, Sheriff," Jack called out in a voice that was almost friendly. "Nice day for a ride." "Jack McCready," Sheriff Crawford replied evenly. "You are under arrest for robbery, murder, and kidnapping. Step down from your horses with your hands where I can see them." Jack laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Now, Sheriff, I think you are operating under some false assumptions. We have not done anything wrong. In fact, we are here looking for someone, a young lady who might have gotten lost. We are concerned citizens trying to help. The young lady is safe, no thanks to you, and she has told us everything about how you took her from the stagecoach and held her prisoner. It is over, Jack. Surrender now, and this does not have to end in bloodshed." Jack's expression hardened. "That girl is a liar, and she belongs to us. We found her. We kept her safe. Now we are taking her back." "That is not going to happen," Samuel said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, but carried clearly. "You are not going near her." Jack's eyes focused on Samuel, studying him. "I know you. You are one of the Olsen boys. Which one are you?" "Samuel." "Ah, the brother of the kid who tried to play hero at your ranch. Sorry about that, by the way. Billy here did not mean to kill him. Things just got out of hand." Jack's tone was casual, as if discussing the weather. Samuel felt rage course through him, but he kept it contained. His hands remained steady on his rifle. "Thomas was 19 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. Yeah, well, that is the risk you take when you try to stop men with guns." Jack shifted in his saddle. "Now, here is how this is going to work. You are going to bring that girl out here, and we are going to ride away. Everyone goes home happy, or we can do this the hard way, and a lot of people in this town are going to get hurt. Your choice, Sheriff." "I already gave you my answer," Crawford replied. "You are under arrest. Last chance to do this peacefully." For a long moment, nobody moved. The street was silent except for the distant sound of someone hammering at the blacksmith shop. Then Billy McCready spoke up, his voice higher and more anxious than his brother's. "Jack, maybe we should just go. This is not worth dying over." "Shut up, Billy!" Jack never took his eyes off the porch. "We are not leaving without our insurance." "She is not your insurance!" Billy's voice rose. "She is a person, Jack. This is wrong, and you know it. I never wanted any part of kidnapping some girl, and now you are going to get us both killed over her?" "I said shut up!" Jack turned in his saddle to glare at his brother, and in that instant of distraction, Sheriff Crawford made his move. The sheriff's gun came up fast, aimed at Jack. "Hands up, both of you, now!" Everything happened at once. Jack's hand went for his gun, even as he tried to control his startled horse. Samuel's rifle came up, tracking Billy, who was fumbling for his own weapon. Gunfire erupted, the reports echoing off the buildings. Samuel's first shot took Billy in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. The sheriff's gun barked twice, and Jack jerked as at least one bullet found its mark. But Jack McCready was tough and determined. Even wounded, he got his gun clear and fired toward the porch. Wood splintered next to Samuel's head as he dove for cover. The sheriff fired again, and this time Jack fell from his horse, hitting the dirt street hard. His gun skittered away from his hand. The whole exchange had taken maybe 10 seconds. Now, silence fell again, broken only by Billy McCready's groans of pain as he clutched his wounded shoulder. Samuel stood cautiously, rifle still ready, and descended from the porch with the sheriff. Deputies emerged from their positions, converging on the fallen men. Jack McCready lay on his back in the street, blood spreading across his chest. His eyes found Samuel as the deputy knelt beside him. "You got lucky," Jack rasped. "No," Samuel replied quietly. "You got what you deserved." Jack's eyes lost focus, and then he was gone. Samuel felt nothing beyond a grim satisfaction. This man had killed Thomas, had terrorized Fiona, had hurt so many people. Justice had been served, even if it had come by violence. Billy McCready was still alive, wounded but not critically. Doc Hansen was summoned to treat him before he was locked in the town jail to await trial. As the immediate danger passed and the street began to fill with curious townspeople, Samuel realized he was shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Sheriff Crawford clapped him on the shoulder. "You all right, Sam?" "Yeah, I am all right." Samuel looked at Jack McCready's body being covered with a sheet. "It is over." "Not quite. There are still 3 more members of that gang out there somewhere, but they are someone else's problem now. You have done your part." The sheriff studied Samuel's face. "Go on. Go tell Miss Preston she is safe. I think she needs to hear it from you." Samuel nodded and walked back to Doc Hansen's house. His legs felt unsteady, and he realized he was exhausted, the weight of the past weeks finally catching up with him. Inside, he found Fiona standing in the hallway with her brother. She had obviously heard the gunfire, and her face was pale with worry. "Samuel!" She rushed to him, and without thinking, he opened his arms. She fell against his chest, and he held her, feeling her trembling. "I heard shooting. Are you hurt? What happened?" "I am fine. It is over. Jack McCready is dead. Billy is wounded and in custody. You are safe now, Fiona. Truly safe." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And you are all right? You are not hurt? Not a scratch?" Samuel reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. The gesture was intimate, familiar, as if they had known each other for years rather than just a day. "You can breathe easy now." Fiona nodded, but she did not pull away from his embrace. They stood there in the hallway, holding each other, while Henry tactfully found something else to look at. Finally, Martha Hansen cleared her throat from the doorway of the back room. "Well, now that the excitement is over, I think Miss Preston should rest. And Mr. Olsen, you look like you could use some sleep yourself." Reluctantly, Samuel released Fiona, but she kept hold of his hand. "You will come back, will not you? You promise me dinner." Samuel smiled, feeling something warm and good replacing the cold anger that had driven him for weeks. "I will come back, I promise. You rest now." As he left Doc Hansen's house and walked through the town, Samuel felt changed. The grief over Thomas would never fully leave him, but it no longer consumed him. Justice had been served, and something new had entered his life, something unexpected and precious, a connection to a brave, resilient woman who had survived darkness and emerged into light. Over the next week, as Fiona recovered her strength, Samuel found reasons to visit her every day. At first, it was just to check on her welfare. Then it became clear that they both looked forward to these visits for reasons that had nothing to do with her recovery. They would sit on Doc Hansen's porch in the evening, when the heat had lessened, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Fiona told him about growing up in Portland, about her parents and their deaths, about her dreams of becoming a teacher like her brother. Samuel told her about the ranch, about learning to ride and rope and shoot, about the beauty of the high desert and the harshness of its winters. They discovered they shared a love of reading, though books were scarce in Pendleton. Fiona promised to share her collection once she was settled. Henry watched these developments with barely concealed amusement and approval. He liked Samuel, recognized him as an honorable man, and could see that his sister was happier than she had been in years. The trauma of her captivity had not broken her. If anything, it seemed to have clarified what mattered to her. When Fiona was finally well enough to leave Doc Hansen's care, Henry had arranged for her to stay at the same boarding house where he lived. Mrs. Cooper, the landlady, was a stern but kind woman who took one look at Fiona and declared she would take care of the poor dear. Fiona was given a clean, comfortable room with a view of the Blue Mountains, and she immediately set about making it her own. Samuel helped move her few belongings, the things that had been recovered from the stagecoach holdup. It was not much. Most of her things had been stolen or scattered, but she had her mother's silver hairbrush and a few pieces of clothing, and she declared that was enough to start fresh. That evening, Samuel finally took Fiona to dinner, as promised. They went to the Pendleton Hotel dining room, the finest establishment in town. Fiona wore a dress that Mrs. Cooper had helped her acquire, a simple blue cotton that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Samuel had cleaned up as well, wearing his best shirt and jacket, his hair neatly combed. They sat at a corner table, and as they ate pot roast and potatoes and fresh bread, Samuel found himself talking more freely than he ever had. There was something about Fiona that made him want to share everything, to hold nothing back. She listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and shared her own thoughts and feelings with equal openness. "I have been thinking," Fiona said as they finished their meal. "Henry says there is a need for teachers here in Pendleton. The school is growing, and they could use another instructor. I have always wanted to teach, like my parents did." "You would be wonderful at it," Samuel said sincerely. "You have patience and intelligence, and you care about people. That is what makes a good teacher." Fiona smiled. "Henry said the same thing. He is going to introduce me to the school board next week." She paused, then added more quietly, "I want to stay here, Samuel, in Pendleton. I want to make a life here." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "I am glad, more than glad." They looked at each other across the table, and the truth hung between them, unspoken but understood. What had started as a rescue, born out of violence and danger, had become something deeper. They had connected in a way that neither had expected, but both recognized as rare and valuable. Over the following months, their relationship deepened naturally and inevitably. Samuel continued his work as a deputy, though Sheriff Crawford noted that he seemed happier, less driven by the dark need for vengeance that had consumed him after Thomas's death. Fiona began teaching at the school, and her students adored her gentle manner and creative lessons. She had a gift for making learning exciting, and parents soon sought her out to praise her work. They courted properly, with all the conventions expected in a small town in 1878. Samuel would call on Fiona at the boarding house, and they would take walks together through town, or ride out to see the countryside. He showed her the ranch where he had grown up, introducing her to his family. His mother embraced Fiona immediately, declaring that Samuel had finally shown some sense in his choice of companion. His older brother Martin approved as well, noting that Fiona had a strength that complemented Samuel's steady nature. For Fiona's part, she introduced Samuel to her students, and he would sometimes visit her classroom to talk about what it was like to work on a ranch or to track outlaws. The children were fascinated, and Samuel discovered he enjoyed teaching in his own way. He and Fiona would discuss pedagogy in the evenings, and Samuel found himself seeing the world through her eyes, appreciating the importance of education in building a better future. As autumn arrived and the heat of summer gave way to crisp, cool days, Samuel knew what he wanted. He had known for weeks, really, but he wanted to do things right. He spoke with Henry first, asking formally for permission to court his sister with the intention of marriage. Henry, who had been expecting this conversation, granted his blessing enthusiastically. Then Samuel went to the jeweler in town and spent most of his savings on a simple gold ring with a small diamond. It was not much by city standards, but it was what he could afford, and he hoped it would be enough. He planned his proposal carefully. He wanted it to be special, memorable. In late October, when the autumn colors painted the Blue Mountains in gold and red, Samuel borrowed a wagon from his brother and packed a picnic basket with Fiona's favorite foods. He told her to dress warmly and be ready for an adventure. They drove out of town on a Saturday morning, heading east into the foothills. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and fallen leaves. Samuel took them to a place he had discovered as a boy, a meadow high in the hills where you could see for miles in every direction. The grass was golden in the autumn sun, and wildflowers still bloomed in sheltered spots. They spread a blanket and ate lunch, talking and laughing, enjoying the solitude and beauty. When they had finished eating, Samuel helped Fiona to her feet and led her to the edge of the meadow, where the view was most spectacular. Below them, the Umatilla Valley spread out in a patchwork of fields and grasslands, with the river winding through like a silver ribbon. In the distance, they could just make out Pendleton. "I used to come here when I was younger," Samuel said, standing behind Fiona with his arms around her waist as they looked at the view. "Whenever I needed to think about something important, I would ride up here. It helped me get perspective." "It is beautiful," Fiona said, leaning back against him. "Thank you for sharing it with me." "Fiona," Samuel said, turning her to face him, "these past few months have been the happiest of my life. When I found you in that cellar, I was lost. I was consumed by grief and anger, and I could not see past it. But you changed that. You showed me that there is still light in the world, still beauty and hope and love. Fiona's eyes were bright as she looked up at him. Samuel, let me finish, he said gently. I love you, Fiona Preston. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you see the best in people. I love how you make me want to be a better man. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box containing the ring. Fiona's hands flew to her mouth as he opened it and knelt on one knee in the meadow grass. Will you marry me, Fiona? Will you let me spend my life making you happy? Tears were streaming down Fiona's cheeks, but she was smiling brighter than Samuel had ever seen. Yes, yes, of course I will marry you. Samuel stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of everything. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, Fiona looked at the ring on her hand and then back at Samuel. I love you too, she said. I think I have loved you since the moment you broke through that door and carried me into the sunlight. You saved me, Samuel, in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Samuel replied, touching his forehead to hers. You gave me a reason to live again, to hope again. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, planning their future. They decided to marry in the spring, giving them time to save money and prepare. Samuel would continue working as a deputy for now, but eventually he wanted to have his own small ranch. Fiona would keep teaching, at least until they had children. They talked about the house they would build together, about the family they would raise, about growing old together in this place they both loved. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Pendleton, and the town celebrated with them. Samuel and Fiona were well liked, and people were genuinely happy to see them find each other. Mrs. Cooper at the boarding house became involved in planning the wedding with an enthusiasm that both amused and touched Fiona. Henry was delighted, already imagining the nieces and nephews his sister would give him. Winter came to eastern Oregon with its usual severity, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. But for Samuel and Fiona, the cold only gave them more excuses to spend time together by fires, wrapped in blankets, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel taught Fiona to play chess, and she taught him to appreciate poetry. They read to each other from books borrowed from Henry's collection, and they discovered that they fit together in every way that mattered. As spring approached and the wedding date drew near, preparations intensified. Fiona sewed her own wedding dress with help from Mrs. Cooper and Martha Hanson, creating a simple but elegant gown of white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Samuel worked with his brother to build a small house on a piece of land Martin had given him as a wedding present. It was just 2 rooms for now, but it was sturdy and well made, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun. The wedding took place on a warm day in April 1879, almost exactly 8 months after Samuel had found Fiona in that cellar. The ceremony was held at the Pendleton Community Church, with half the town in attendance. Henry gave his sister away with tears in his eyes, placing her hand in Samuel's with a whispered blessing. Sheriff Crawford stood as Samuel's best man, and Mrs. Cooper served as Fiona's matron of honor. As they exchanged vows, Samuel looked into Fiona's eyes and saw his future reflected there. She was no longer the terrified woman he had rescued from darkness. She was strong and confident, glowing with happiness, promising to love him for the rest of her life. And when he made his own vows, he meant every word with his whole heart. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing that lasted late into the evening. Samuel and Fiona danced their first dance as husband and wife, and then they danced again and again, unable to stop smiling at each other. When the evening finally ended, they rode together to their new home to begin their life together. The years that followed were good ones. Samuel eventually left his position as deputy to focus on building up their small ranch. It was hard work, but satisfying, and Fiona helped when she was not teaching. They raised cattle and horses, and Samuel discovered he had a gift for training the latter. Word spread about the quality of his animals, and buyers came from as far as Portland to purchase from him. Fiona continued teaching for 3 years until their first child was born in the summer of 1882. They named him Thomas after Samuel's brother, and he was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to smile from the moment he entered the world. Fiona reduced her teaching to part-time after that, wanting to be home with her son but not wanting to give up the work she loved entirely. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Eleanor after Fiona's mother. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and she was as determined and strong-willed as both her parents combined. Samuel doted on his daughter, and Fiona teased him that he would spoil her rotten. Another son came in 1887, named Martin after Samuel's brother. By then, the ranch had grown into a successful operation, and they had built additions to the house to accommodate their growing family. The house was always full of laughter and noise, with children playing and neighbors visiting and life unfolding in the best possible way. Through it all, Samuel and Fiona's love for each other only deepened. They faced challenges, as all couples do. There were hard winters and dry summers that threatened their livelihood. There was sickness and worry when the children got sick or injured, as children do. There were disagreements about money and child rearing and 100 other things. But they faced everything together, always coming back to the love that had brought them together. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Fiona back to the meadow where he had proposed. They left the children with Henry for the day and rode up into the hills just as they had years before. The meadow looked much the same, though they were older now, marked by the years and the work and the joys and sorrows of life. They spread a blanket and sat together, looking out over the valley. Pendleton had grown larger, more prosperous. Their own ranch was visible in the distance, the house and barn Samuel had built with his own hands. "Do you ever think about that day?" Fiona asked quietly. "The day you found me?" "Sometimes," Samuel admitted. "Though it feels like a lifetime ago now, like it happened to different people." "In a way, it did. We were different people then, broken, both of us. You by grief, me by fear." Fiona turned to look at him. "But we healed each other. We built something beautiful together." Samuel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Best thing I ever did was follow those tracks to that abandoned ranch. Best decision I ever made was breaking through that door." "And carrying me into the sunlight," Fiona added with a smile. "Do not forget that part. Very heroic." Samuel laughed. "I will never forget any of it. Finding you changed my life, Fiona. It gave me a reason to live again, to hope again. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I know," Fiona said softly. "I feel the same way. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had not found me that day, if you had followed the other riders instead, or if you had turned back. But then I remind myself that you did find me. We did find each other, and that is all that matters." They sat in the meadow until the sun began to set, just as they had on the day he proposed, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. 10 years of marriage had given them this, the ability to simply be together, needing nothing more than each other's company to be content. As they rode back down to the ranch as twilight fell, they could see lamplight in the windows of their home. Henry would have the children fed and ready for bed, probably wearing out from trying to keep up with their energy. The thought made both Samuel and Fiona smile. Life continued its rhythm through the years that followed. Young Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning, like his Uncle Henry. Eleanor was adventurous and bold, always exploring and getting into mischief. Little Martin was the peacemaker, sweet-natured and kind to everyone he met. More children came. Another daughter in 1889, named Rose for the flowers she loved, and finally, in 1892, twin boys they named William and James. Their house was full to bursting with noise and love and the beautiful chaos of a large family. Fiona had stopped teaching by then, her hands full with their children and the work of the ranch. But she never stopped being an educator. She taught all their children to read and write, to think critically and care deeply. Samuel taught them to ride and work with animals, to respect the land and understand the value of hard work. Together, they created a home that became a gathering place for the community. Neighbors knew they were always welcome at the Olsen ranch for a meal or advice or just companionship. Henry was a frequent visitor, as was Sheriff Crawford, who had become a close friend over the years. Martha Hanson and Mrs. Cooper remained important parts of their lives, watching the children grow and offering wisdom gleaned from their own long lives. As the century drew to a close, Samuel and Fiona found themselves in their 40s, looking back on more than 20 years of marriage. They had weathered everything life threw at them and emerged stronger for it. Their children were growing up healthy and happy. Their ranch was prosperous, and their love had only grown richer with time. One evening in the summer of 1899, after all the children were finally asleep, Samuel and Fiona sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. It was a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, these quiet moments together at the end of busy days. "I have been thinking," Fiona said, resting her head on Samuel's shoulder, "about everything that has happened since that day you found me, about all the years we have had together, all the children we have raised. Sometimes it feels like a dream, like it is too good to be real." "It is real," Samuel assured her, wrapping his arm around her. "Every moment of it, the good and the bad, the easy and the hard, all of it real, all of it ours. I know, and I would not change a single moment, even the difficult ones, because they all led us here, to this life, to this family." Fiona lifted her head to look at him. "I love you, Samuel Olsen, more today than the day we married, and less than I will tomorrow." Samuel smiled, recognizing the line from a poem she had once read to him. "And I love you, Fiona Olsen. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children. You are my whole world." They kissed then, soft and gentle. A kiss that held more than 20 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they pulled apart, Fiona laughed quietly. "What?" Samuel asked. "I was just thinking about something Mrs. Cooper said to me when we first got engaged. She said that marriages built on dramatic rescues and intense circumstances never lasted, that we would realize we had nothing in common once the excitement wore off." Fiona shook her head. She was so wrong. The excitement never wore off. It just changed into something deeper, something better. "She apologized for that eventually, if I remember right," Samuel said with amusement. "At our 5th anniversary party, said she had never been happier to be proven wrong. She did, dear Mrs. Cooper. She cried at every single one of our children's births." Fiona smiled at the memory. "We have been blessed, Samuel, with good friends, good family, good health. With each other, most of all." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing. Closer by, one of the horses nickered softly in the barn. Inside the house, they heard the faint sound of one of the twins crying out in his sleep, then settling again. "We should go in soon," Fiona said, though she made no move to stand. "Early morning tomorrow. Thomas wants to help you with the new foals." "He has got a good hand with horses," Samuel observed proudly. "Takes after his mother in being patient with them." "He takes after his father in being stubborn about learning every detail," Fiona countered with a grin. "That boy asks more questions than all the other children combined. Curious mind, that is good. He will go far in life." Eventually, they did go inside, checking on each of the children as they made their way to their own room. Thomas slept with a book still in his hand. Eleanor had kicked off all her covers despite the cool night air. Martin was curled up with the puppy he had begged for until they relented. Rose had her dolls arranged carefully on the pillow beside her. The twins were tangled together in their shared crib, impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. In their own bed, Samuel pulled Fiona close, and she nestled against him in the way that had become second nature over the years. This was how they fell asleep every night, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for another day together. The years continued to pass, marked by small moments and large milestones. Thomas went off to university in Portland when he turned 18, the first of their children to leave home. It was hard for both Samuel and Fiona to let him go, but they were proud of his ambition and intelligence. Eleanor surprised no one by declaring her intention to become a doctor, a profession just beginning to open up to women. She had her father's determination and her mother's compassion, and Samuel had no doubt she would achieve whatever she set her mind to. Martin followed his father into ranching, taking naturally to the work and the animals. Samuel began teaching him the business side of things, preparing to eventually pass the ranch down to his son. Rose became a teacher like her mother and uncle, taking a position at the Pendleton school where Fiona had once taught. The twins, still young, were already showing distinct personalities. William loved mechanics and was always taking things apart to see how they worked, while James was artistic, drawing everything he saw. As Samuel and Fiona entered their 50s, they began to slow down slightly, letting their children take on more of the work of the ranch. But they remained active and involved, still very much the heart of their family. They had become grandparents by then, Thomas having married a lovely young woman from Portland and given them their first grandchild in 1903. Through all of it, the love between Samuel and Fiona remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. They still had their evening talks on the porch. They still made time for each other despite the demands of family and work. They still looked at each other and saw the people they had fallen in love with all those years ago, even as their hair grayed and lines appeared on their faces. On a warm August evening in 1908, almost exactly 30 years to the day after Samuel had found Fiona in that cellar, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. Their children were grown and scattered now, though most remained in the Pendleton area. The house was quieter than it had been in years, but it was a comfortable quiet. 30 years, Fiona said wonderingly. Has it really been 30 years since you rode up to that abandoned ranch? 30 years ago tomorrow, Samuel confirmed. Best day of my life, though I did not know it at the time. You were just looking for justice for Thomas, Fiona remembered. You never expected to find a half-starved woman in a cellar. And you never expected a dusty cowboy to break down a door and carry you into the sunlight. Samuel smiled at the memory. We were quite a pair. We still are. Fiona reached over and took his hand, their fingers interlacing naturally. Samuel, I want you to know something. These 30 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You gave me love, family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more. Samuel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. The gift was mine, Fiona. You brought light back into my life when I was lost in darkness. You gave me reasons to live, to hope, to believe in good things again. Our children, our grandchildren, this life we have built together, it is all because of you. It is because of us, Fiona corrected gently. Everything we have, we built together, as partners, as equals, as two people who chose each other and kept choosing each other every single day. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The air was cooling, and somewhere in the distance they could hear their grandchildren playing at Eleanor's house down the road. The sound of young voices and laughter drifted on the evening breeze, and Samuel and Fiona smiled at each other. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? Fiona asked. After you got me out of the cellar? I said a lot of things that day. You promised me I was safe. You said you gave me your word. Fiona's eyes were soft with emotion. And you kept that promise, Samuel. Every day for 30 years, you have kept me safe. Safe from fear, from loneliness, from despair. You gave me a life worth living. You did the same for me, Samuel replied, his voice rough with feeling. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Fiona. Maybe more. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, holding hands and watching their world settle into night. Inside the house, lamps would need to be lit soon. Supper would need to be prepared. The mundane tasks of daily life would continue, but for this moment, they simply existed together, two people who had found each other in darkness and built a life in the light. And as they finally stood to go inside, Samuel pulled Fiona close one more time, holding her as he had held her that day 30 years ago. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt the same sense of safety and love she had felt from the very beginning. I love you, Samuel murmured into her hair. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. And I love you, Fiona replied, lifting her face for his kiss. From that first moment in the cellar until my last breath. Forever. They walked into their home together, hand in hand, exactly as they had walked through life for 3 decades. Behind them, the Oregon night settled over their ranch, peaceful and beautiful. And somewhere in the stars above, perhaps Thomas Olsen looked down and smiled, knowing that his death, tragic as it was, had somehow led to this. A love story, a family, a life well lived. The years continued their gentle march forward, bringing more grandchildren and the joy of watching the family tree branch and grow. Samuel and Fiona aged gracefully, still deeply in love, still partners in every sense of the word. They had their share of sorrows. Henry passed away in 1912, and they mourned the loss of the brother who had been such an important part of their lives. Samuel's mother followed a year later, having lived to see most of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. These losses were painful, but Samuel and Fiona weathered them together, as they had weathered everything else. By the time they reached their 70th birthdays, Samuel and Fiona had lived full, rich lives. They had 6 children, 18 grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch they had built together was now run by Martin and his family, but Samuel still liked to visit the horses every day, running his weathered hands over their necks and remembering the young man he had been. On a summer evening in 1918, 40 years after that fateful day, Samuel and Fiona sat on their porch once again. They were old now, their hair white, their movements slower. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had fallen in love with all those years ago. 40 years, Fiona said, echoing the conversation they had had 10 years prior. 4 decades since you found me. Best 40 years of my life, Samuel replied, reaching for her hand. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, casting golden light across the land they had called home for so long. Around them, the ranch was alive with the sounds of family. Grandchildren played in the yard. Eleanor and her husband were visiting for supper, their voices drifting through the open windows. Martin was in the barn, tending to the evening chores. Rose had brought her family down from town for the weekend. It was chaotic and beautiful, and Samuel and Fiona watched it all with deep contentment. "We did good, didn't we?" Fiona asked quietly. "We did better than good," Samuel replied. "We built something that will last long after we are gone. This family, this place, the love we put into everything. It will endure." Fiona nodded, blinking back tears. "I am so grateful, Samuel, for all of it. For you, most of all. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. And you gave me a reason to live when I thought I had lost everything," Samuel said, bringing her hand to his lips. "We saved each other, remember? That first day and every day after." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Samuel and Fiona rose from their chairs and went inside to join their family for supper. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with laughter and conversation and the love that bound them all together. And at the head of the table, Samuel and Fiona sat side by side, hands clasped beneath the table, hearts full of gratitude for the beautiful life they had built together from that moment of rescue and redemption 4 decades before. They lived many more years together, eventually passing peacefully in their sleep just months apart, as if even death could not separate them for long. Their children laid them to rest side by side in the Pendleton Cemetery, under headstones that bore a simple inscription: "Together in darkness, together in light, together forever." And the story of the cowboy who broke down a door and carried a woman into warm sunlight became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It was a story about rescue and hope, about how love can emerge from the darkest circumstances, about 2 people who found each other when they needed it most, and built a life together that endured beyond their years. It was a story about the Wild West in all its harshness and beauty. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that reminds us that even in the hardest times, love finds a way.